I am very grateful to be with all of you this evening. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you, Sunil, Anubhuti, Adharna, this beautiful family, for opening the doors to your wonderful home for all of us. It is said that a home where the family centers their life in the principles of Dharma, in devotion to God, that home is Vaikuntha, the spiritual world. When we put this higher principle in the center between us, then all inevitable differences can be overcome, can be transcended. And this is so much a problem in the world today. People have become so obsessed with superficial things and superficial differences that we forget what's actually meaningful and purposeful in life. It is said that in a cultured society, people love people and use things. But unfortunately, all over the world we find that people love things and use people to somehow or other get them and keep them. It is our tendency to become so obsessed with a quantitative conception of what will make us happy. And we neglect the quality of life. Quantity can never give fulfillment without quality. Because the heart yearns for love. This is the basic principle of life. The need to love and be loved. Things could give some flickering satisfaction to the physical senses and to the mind, but things cannot touch the heart. Only to love and to be loved can give fulfillment within. And according to the Bhagavad Gita, and in fact all the great scriptures of the world, the origin of that truth is the Atma, the eternal living force, the soul. Its natural love for the Supreme Soul, or for God. The Sanskrit word yoga means to reconnect our consciousness with the source of all consciousness. To reconnect the soul with the Supreme Soul, or God, who we call Krishna in the Vedic literatures. In the Bible it is said that the first and great commandment is to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And the natural byproduct of loving God is you love your neighbor as yourself. The Gita explains it so nicely. Mamaivam so jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. That every living being is a part of God. Aham bija pratapita. That means the Supreme Lord is the mother and the father of all living beings. You cannot love God and not love everyone. We may not like what they do, but we see within ourselves, deeper than just the temporary designations of this body and mind, we see and understand our own essence. The living force is such an ananda, eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. When we recognize that within ourselves, then we could also recognize it within all living beings. The great Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he said, he was a great saint. He had a wife and 10 children. He was a judge, a magistrate under the British rule. He said, the testimony of true love for God is when there is unselfish compassion for all living beings. That's the universal principle of all religion. Religion comes from the Latin word religio, which means to reconnect. Exactly the same definition as yoga. To reconnect our consciousness with our source. I was asked to speak something about this book that I wrote, The Journey Home. Sunil and Anubhuti, it was their request, so I will try to say something. On this principle, I was born in Chicago, Illinois. When I was 4 years old, my mother and father brought their 3 little sons to a village about 30 miles north of Chicago to have a more peaceful, safe life. And everything was there. There was prosperity. There was clean toilets. There were smooth roads, nice highways. But so much struggle. When I was 9 years old, my father went through major bankruptcy. And he struggled like anything to try to just sustain us. And because of that, even though he worked so hard, and my mother, she was always cutting little coupons out of the newspapers to save 1 cent or 2 cents for whatever she was buying. But the amazing thing is the grace in which they did it. My father would work about 16, 17 hours a day, just trying to keep people from taking away our little house. And when he would come home, he would say, actually, money isn't so important. He said, what's really important is our love for each other. And I'd say, well, then why are you working all day? You leave at 6 in the morning, you come back at midnight. He said, we have to do it. We have to do it. But it's not what's really important. And my bedroom, I shared it with my little brother, was right next to the only bathroom in our house. And early in the morning, my father, he was struggling like anything. He would always sing a song in the shower. I don't know if this is a tradition in India, but in America, it's the tradition to sing in the shower. Everyone sings in the shower. They even, in the movies, they sing in the shower. My father sang this one song, and he sang it with so much feeling. When April showers come your way, they bring the flowers that bloom in May. The idea of this song is the hardships in life are actually arrangements for something wonderful in the future, if we just see it that way. And he actually saw his bankruptcy. I mean, he really, really lost everything. He really saw that something beautiful is going to come out of this. And something beautiful did come out of it. I became a Swami because I didn't want to get involved in all this stuff. But my father did become a rich man later on. But when I was a teenager, we have our conceptions of America, but the 1960s, the country was torn apart. There was a war in Vietnam, and many of us thought it was a senseless war. And it was a war where every single man, when he reaches 18 years old, is eligible to the draft. When you're drafted, you have two choices: go to war or go to jail. You weren't asked. You were told. There was also the civil rights movement, where a person with dark complexion was condemned to live in the ghettos their whole lives. The Constitution guaranteed freedom, but there was no freedom in the 1950s and 60s. You couldn't go to college. You couldn't get a good job unless it was really an exception. And every day in school, I was told to pledge allegiance to the flag, where we said that this is one nation, indivisible, with freedom and justice for all. Freedom and justice for all. Freedom and justice if you're a certain color. Freedom and justice if you're a certain religion. Freedom and justice even if you're the majority religion and the majority color, still you're forced to go and fight and probably be killed in a war. Is this freedom and justice? There was a revolution in America. It was called the counterculture, where millions and millions of people in the younger generation revolted against the entire establishment, the government, their parents, everything. There were riots. Cities were burning in the civil rights movement. Detroit burned down. Watts burned down. Newark, New Jersey burned down. There was war everywhere. The counterculture was demonstrating against war, and the U.S. military were shooting and killing their own college students. This was what I grew up as a teenager. I had many questions. And by that time, my father was quite well-to-do, our family. And interestingly, 99% of the people who joined the counterculture, of these millions of young people, they all came from middle, upper class, and wealthy families. Something didn't make sense. So I was trying to understand. I saw the words of India's Mahatma Gandhi. Be the change you want to see in the world. And I started to see in my life that the people revolting against hypocrisy were just as hypocritical as the people that they were revolting against. They just had a different hairstyle and a different dress, and they talked a different language. We actually made up our own language. It was English, but you would never understand if I talked like we used to talk. It was part of the revolution. We had our own language, we had our own dress code, we had our own everything. And I realized that the real change has to be a change of heart, a change of values, a change toward real integrity. So one day, my best friend from childhood, his name was Gary, he called me up. I was in New York City, and he was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He said, you have to come here because I need to tell you something. So in those days, I didn't have money. I would hitchhike wherever I was going. So I went to Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and he said that I'm going to Europe in 3 days. You have to come with me. I said, I don't have any money, and I have a job this summer. Gary said, I don't have any money either. Frank, our common friend, he's going to pay for both of us. So I said, yes, I will go. And a few days later, I was on a $65 flight from New York to Iceland. And then somehow we got a connecting flight from Iceland to Luxembourg. And the first night, we got there in the evening, and the first night we understood how Frank was going to sponsor us. The three of us slept on the ground in a one-man tent. Very tentative. And we were happy. It didn't matter. It was the first time in our lives we were ever outside of our native country of America. We were teenagers. We were very enthusiastic to experience the world, to see how other people think, what they eat, what they think about America, what their conception of God was. We used to read about all these countries. Now we get to actually be there. It was very thrilling. So the first morning, the sun rose, the roosters were crowing, and we went out of the tent, and we found out there was a little waterfall that we could take a shower in. So we went to the waterfall, we returned to the tent, and Frank, he was devastated. We said, what happened? He said, I've been robbed. All our money is gone. We had a return ticket on Icelandic Airlines. He said, we have to go back. We can't survive with nothing. Let's go. And he started walking. And he looked back. He said, let's go. And he walked again. And he looked back. He said, you're not coming? And Gary and I, we've come this far. So he left. And we were hitchhiking from place to place, from Luxembourg to Holland, to Belgium, England. And we were making the scene with young people. Just last year, I was invited to speak in the House of Commons in the British Parliament. And something incredible took place. I was in a room. I was given a subject to speak by the Parliament. They asked me to speak on spirituality and the big society. So I offered a little prayer to my Guru and to Krishna. What should I say? And then I looked out the window and I saw the River Thames flowing very slowly. And on the other side of the river I saw a boundary wall. And I remembered in 1970, 41 years before, all night long I would sit on that boundary wall, looking down at the river, wondering, where is the river of destiny going to lead me? I would look across the river and see the Parliament. And I would see that window, obviously. And now I'm looking at the boundary wall from inside. As a Swami. I didn't even know what a Swami was when I was sitting on that wall. I never heard the word Krishna before when I was sitting on that wall. I had no conception of India. How did all that change? My friend and I, we were going to art museums, to cathedrals, to synagogues, to temples, going to natural scenic places, trying to go deeper in our own spirituality. And eventually, we were living in a cave in a Greek island of Crete. And I would climb a mountain every day and meditate and pray from sunrise to sunset. And my friend, he would go to the seaside and meditate and pray from sunrise to sunset. One day, as the sun was setting, something happened. I heard a voice from within my heart. It was a silent voice, but it was the loudest thing I ever heard in my life. 3 words were spoken. It stunned me. I knew if I follow this calling, I had to leave everything behind and nothing would ever be the same for me. The 3 words were, go to India. India? I had never met an Indian in my life. I had never eaten Indian food in my life. I had never eaten a chili pepper in my life. I didn't have a map. I didn't have any money to buy a map. But I was committed to go to India. I went back to the cave where Gary was sitting in meditation. I said, Gary, something incredible happened to me today. Gary said, something incredible happened to me. I said, what? He said, at sunset, I heard a voice. I said, you heard a voice? He said, yes. I said, what did he say? Gary said, you won't believe me. I said, I will believe you. He said, no, you will not believe me. I said, just tell me. He said, I heard a voice. It spoke 3 words. I said, what were the 3 words? He says, you're not going to believe me. I said, just tell me. It said, go to Israel. Where? He said, I told you wouldn't believe me. I said, no, I didn't hear you. Where? He said, Israel. We should go to Israel. I said, he told me to go to India. India. We were both so shocked. There was total silence for about 20 minutes. And I just looked up at the stars. And I whispered into the sky, I'm coming. And then I said to Gary, at sunrise tomorrow, I'm leaving for India. Usually when we're going on a trip, we have our tickets, we pack our bags. I didn't have any bags. I was living in a cave. I'm leaving for India. Gary was not willing to hitchhike to India. So I left him behind. And the journey home tells about that story. Hitchhiking. My first hitchhiking was, I hitchhiked by asking a boatman, let me work on your boat to get to Athens. And then from there to Thessalonica, to Istanbul, through all of Turkey, through all of Iran, through all of Afghanistan, through Pakistan. From London to the border of India took 6 months. The other day, not the other day, last year actually, I spoke at the University of London. And they asked me to speak about this story. So I had a lot of time. I told some of this story. And afterward, many people bought the book, Journey Home, and were asking me to sign something. And one girl came up to me. She was about 22, British girl. She said, I really liked your story. Do you know why? She said, I am the president of the All UK Hitchhikers Association. She said, I want to take our group to hitchhike from England to India, the same path that you took. Through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan. On the way through France and Italy. She said, can you give us some guidance? I said, yes, I will definitely give you guidance. Take your group and hitchhike to Heathrow Airport. And then take an airplane. What took me 6 months now takes me under 9 hours for the same journey. It's not as life-changing, but it's much safer. I think I aged about 30 years on that journey. There were many dramatic experiences, near-death experiences, people trying to kill me, getting all kinds of diseases, and so many beautiful people and beautiful things and beautiful, incredible lessons I was learning. One of my first gurus was a mongoose. I'm not going to tell you the story, but if you want to, you could read the book. But this mongoose, he crawled up my back I had long hair, made my hair into his nest, and went to sleep. For 6 hours. And I was a guest at somebody's house. We were on his roof. This was in Kandahar, Afghanistan. And I asked my guest, please take this mongoose off my head. And he said, there is a saying among our people, never wake a sleeping mongoose. Because if you startle a mongoose, he will tear your head into shreds. The ancient Egyptians, they worshipped the mongoose because the mongoose kills the cobra, who is the symbol of death. So my advice to you is, do not move until he leaves on his own. He was really heavy. He was literally breaking my neck. Did you ever meet a mongoose? He was curled up on my head. And my friend, he got tired about midnight, and he said, excuse me, I must go to sleep. So I was all alone on this rooftop with the mongoose. And he didn't come alone. He had all these insects that started eating my scalp. They were biting and stinging and sucking, and I couldn't move. And I remember thinking, why is this happening to me? And I was praying to God. God, I'm going on this trip because of you. I'm doing this for you. Why are you doing this to me? The pain was unbearable. It was like a time bomb. I was very afraid. And then I asked a question. What am I supposed to learn from this situation? And as soon as I offered a prayer with that question, the thought came in my mind that this mongoose has come to teach me patience. How to be forbearant toward difficulties in our journey and in our purpose in life. And as soon as I meditated on that concept, the same pain was there. The same danger was there. But I felt totally at peace. I felt totally grateful. This mongoose has come to teach me how to grow. If I'm going to tread this journey, I need to learn patience and forbearance. And about 6 hours later, the mongoose just woke up on his own and crawled down my back, jumped to the floor, and he looked up at me with his very round, glistening eyes. And he just looked at me, and I looked at him. And it seemed to me that he was smiling. Maybe it was my imagination, but I think he was smiling at me. It was like he was thanking me for a good night's rest. And I was thanking him for teaching me such a good lesson. And then he left. Anyways, many things happened. And finally, I came to the border of India. I was emaciated thin because of so many dysenteries and not much food. I was covered with dust. All my clothes, but I only had one extra set of clothes. And when I was escaping in Kabul from somebody who was trying to kill me, I had to leave all that behind. There was in those days a no man's land between Pakistan and India. From Lahore, I walked miles and miles and miles, and I went into the no man's land, and I was so enthusiastic, with such anticipation. Finally, I'm arriving in India, the land of the yogis and the lamas and the gurus and the sages and the Himalayas and the Ganga and the Vedas. I had read so many things. I had so many dreams. My heart was flying across that border. It was the land I was called to. I was trembling with excitement. You see, when things come easy, we usually are not really able to appreciate their value. But when there's a struggle to get something, we really can appreciate the value of what we finally get. And I never had struggled so much in my life as hitchhiking through that Middle East, through these deserts, getting rides on camels and old trucks and walking. Finally, I was there. It was at Firozpur in Punjab. I gave my passport to the immigration agent. She looked at it. I had a valid visa. Everything was in order. She looked at me and said, "You require minimum $200 to enter India. Show me your money." I had a little cloth bag, and I looked through. I remember I had exactly 26 cents in about 5 different currencies. When she saw that, she said, "You are rejected. We have enough beggars. We don't want another one." I pleaded with her. I said, "I risked my life just to try to meet your people and discover the treasures of your culture." I said, "I can't even go back because I only had a 1 entry into Pakistan. So I wasn't allowed back there. And to hitchhike all the way back was impossible." I was pleading with her. The more I pleaded, the more angry she became. And she stomped her military boot down and said, "Do not test my patience." And the border guards put their guns in my face and said, "Go back." I went back where there was a big neem tree, and I sat under that neem tree praying. And then I went back to the border and pleaded again, and they sent me back. They rejected me for 6 hours. But there was no way I was going to go back. Finally, just before the sunset, the guard changed, and an elderly Sikh gentleman took the post, and she drove off in a Jeep. And I went up to him and gave my passport, and he looked at me like I was such a unwanted intruder. He said, "My superior officer has told me that you are rejected. Go back." I started to cry. What else could I do? I wasn't pretending. It was for real. I said, "I have given up everything to find the treasures of your great culture. I promise you, someday I will try to do something good for your people. Just give me a chance." He looked at me in my eyes for about 30 seconds. Then he took my passport and stamped it. He put his hand on my head and said, my child, so I was 19, but I looked about 16. He said, "My child, may you find what you are crying for. Welcome to India."